You're not learning, you're remembering the forbidden Atlantean technique of soul activation. For millennia, a technique was passed on in silence, kept within the crystalline corridors of Atlantis, taught only to initiates who vibrated in truth, not because it was dangerous, but because it was too effective. This practice doesn't teach you, it activates. It doesn't bring something new. It reveals what your soul never forgot. Today, it returns, not as an external teaching, but as internal resonance. Chapter 1. The forbidden knowledge that survived the sinking. They said everything was lost, that when Atlantis sank, everything was erased, temples, technology, wisdom. But they were wrong, because what was most valuable was never outside. It was never stone. It was never written. What was most sacred was sealed in a place no ocean could touch, in the frequency of your soul. You're not here by chance. You're hearing this because somewhere within you, this truth already echoed, perhaps as a recurring dream, perhaps as a feeling that this life isn't the first, perhaps as a spiritual whisper that insists, you're forgetting something important. In Atlantis, there was a practice, not taught in words, not recorded on papyri. It was felt, transmitted in silence, a vibrational technique. Few could access it, and among those who could, none described it, because it couldn't be explained, only activated. It was known as the path of remembrance, not to accumulate knowledge, but to remove the veils of forgetfulness. The Atlantean priests knew, the greatest power of the soul isn't in learning something new, it's in remembering what it already is, and what it already is frightens those who control this world. That's why the technique was forbidden, not because it's dangerous for you, but because it frees you. It breaks the collective enchantment. It dissolves the need to follow. It brings down all external authority that feeds on your doubt. A being who remembers who they are can no longer be manipulated. They don't bow. They don't fear. They don't need to be saved. This is the secret that survived the sinking. Not an artifact, not a book, but a vibration encoded in you. You were born with this memory, but it was silenced. Layers and layers of conditioning, beliefs, fear, guilt, distraction. And now, it awakens. Like a sound you haven't heard since childhood. Like a mirror slowly clearing the dust of centuries. This chapter isn't the beginning of a video. It's the return of a forgotten lineage. You're not just a human being trying to find meaning. You're an Atlantean heir with a spiritual code engraved in the spiral of your energy field. And all you need isn't to understand. It's to remember. If you felt something in this first contact, that's memory. That's a sign. That's the frequency. The Atlantean technique of remembrance begins like this, not with explanation, but with resonance. And if it resonated, it's because you're ready. Chapter 2. The frequency of your true name. They gave you a name when you were born, a sound chosen by others, registered, spoken, repeated. But that's not your true name, just a phonetic shadow, a label for what's incomprehensible. Because the real name isn't spoken, it's felt. In Atlantis, the ancient initiates didn't ask who you were. They felt your frequency, because each being vibrated with a unique signature, a silent sound, an invisible light, a sacred vibration. That was the true name of the soul, a name that doesn't exist in human language, but that can be activated, not by words, but by a state of being. Imagine for a moment that within you exists a musical note. Perfect, immutable, original. But throughout life, that note was covered by noise, trauma, external voices, social roles. Now you live trying to find meaning. But deep down, what you're missing isn't direction. It's tuning. The true name of your soul only resonates when you enter the right frequency. And that's what the Atlantean technique does. It doesn't try to define you. It returns you to the state where you recognize who you are without needing to think. It's not mental. It's not intellectual. It's vibrational. You feel as if something inside you clicks, fits, starts spinning again. Like a forgotten password being typed correctly. Like a door opening after centuries of waiting. You don't know how you know, but you know. It's me. It has always been me. Just forgotten. In Atlantis, when an initiate reached this state of remembrance, they were received in silence, because there was nothing more to be said. Their presence said it all. The body became an altar, the gaze, a mirror, the voice, frequency, and life, a field of authentic resonance. That's why this name is so dangerous, not because it can be pronounced, but because whoever embodies it can no longer be controlled. This being vibrates truth, and truth is the greatest threat to any system based on illusion. You don't need to discover your name. It's already in you, hidden in the etheric field, asleep in the silence between your thoughts, written in the interval between breaths. You don't call it with words. You activate it with presence. You become this name when you live in coherence with your essence. And when that happens, the world responds. Relationships change, environments change, doors open. Reality begins to recognize who you've become, or rather, who you've always been. The Atlantean technique doesn't tell you your name. It reconnects you with it, and that's the greatest power of all. Not the name the world gave you, but the name the universe whispers when you silence. If this chapter activated something in you, don't try to understand. Feel, honor, resonate. Because the soul doesn't need to learn what it already knows. It just needs to remember how to vibrate again. And now, you're starting to remember. Chapter 3. The lie they called you. From the beginning, they taught you who to be. They told you how to dress, what to believe, whom to please, whom to fear. And so, slowly, you stopped being. You became a reflection of expectations, of narratives, of other people's fears. But here is the truth few dare to hear. The you that answers to your name is not you. It's a mold, a program, a carefully implanted script to ensure you never ask, who wrote this? The Atlanteans called this the first lie, the subtlest, the most effective. They knew that a being who forgets who they are can be molded into any role. Servant, soldier, consumer, devotee. And that's what they did to you. They didn't erase you. They distracted you. They sped you up. They filled you with voices, obligations, comparisons, guilt. But the soul watches in silence. The Atlantean technique begins at this point, not with promises of light, but with the courage to face the shadow, to confront the false self, not with hatred, but with lucidity. The technique says, observe what you think, question what you desire, interrogate what you fear, and then ask, is this mine, or was it placed in me? This process is not comfortable. It's an unbuilding. It's like watching a house collapse and realizing it was never yours. It's like waking up from a dream and seeing you spent entire years inside it. But it is also the purest liberation that exists. Because when the false begins to fall, the true begins to vibrate. You are not your profession. You are not the role you play. You are not the past others placed on your shoulders. You are older than all of that. You are the original awareness that watched silently as the mask learned to smile. And now, for the first time, it whispers, "I'm here. Can you feel me?" Deprogramming the false self doesn't mean destroying everything. It means letting go of what is not yours and allowing your true name to return as sound, as light, as direction. In Atlantis, initiates spent entire days in silence, not to escape the world, but to dissolve everything that wasn't pure vibration. They fasted from words, from noise, from corrupted symbols, until the field of the false dissolved and the real self emerged. And now, it's your turn. Do you feel the discomfort, the emptiness, the confusion? That's not weakness. It's the old foundation collapsing. It's your inner system realizing the programming no longer makes sense. You are awakening, and the world around you, still asleep, will try to convince you to stop. But remember, they don't fear your faith. They fear your recognition. They don't fear your search. They fear when you find yourself. So let the doubt come. Let the pain come. Let the remembrance pierce what was imposed. Because behind everything they called you, there is a being who never needed to learn anything, because it always knew. If this chapter made you uncomfortable, maybe it's because it isn't saying something new. It's activating something ancient, something you already knew, and that now you can no longer ignore. Chapter 4. The silence that leads to truth. The most sacred truth of the soul was never spoken in words. It cannot be taught. It can only be felt. And to feel it requires something the modern world no longer knows how to offer: silence. In Atlantis, silence was the highest language. The initiates understood that the universe doesn't speak. It resonates. The answers you seek aren't in more content, more voices, more explanations. They are in the space between thoughts, in the pause, in the stillness, in the place where the ego cannot operate, but the soul knows the way. The Atlantean technique of remembrance doesn't begin with words. It begins with presence. You sit, you breathe, you expect nothing. And even so, something begins to happen. Because true silence is not the absence of sound. It is the full vibrational attention to what exists here now. The Atlanteans called this active silence, a state in which the body falls silent, but the soul sings, where the mind quiets, but the frequency aligns. In that space, sacred symbols begin to emerge, a blue light between the brows, an ethereal sound that feels familiar, a warmth vibrating at the center of the chest. None of this is imagination. It is vibrational memory returning with the power of what was never lost, only muffled. Today, they taught you to fear silence, to fill it with screens, voices, notifications, because the one who remains in emptiness discovers what is real, and the system that conditioned you cannot allow that. Because a being who rediscovers their own frequency steps out of the collective frequency. In Atlantis, the masters would say, when the mind grows silent, the field responds. The field of the soul, the field of the ancestors, the field of civilizations that vibrate beyond time. And it is in that silence that the technique reveals itself. Not as a formula, but as a reconnection. The practice is simple, but profound. Sit. Close your eyes. Breathe. Feel the air as a living presence. Observe the thoughts without clinging. They will scream, but the silence, it will wait. Wait with it. And soon, what was noise dissolves. What was empty fills. And what seemed lost remembers. This is the initiation. You are not hearing anything. but you are receiving everything. Because when the noise ends, the soul begins to speak, and it speaks in pulses, in intuitions, in sudden visions, in memories that arise without warning, but carry the certainty that they are real. The Atlantean technique is not taught, it is evoked, and silence is the first key. If you allow yourself to enter this space, even for a few minutes a day, you will begin to hear what was forgotten. You will begin to feel what was suppressed. You will begin to remember who you are without others. And in this state, something happens. An invisible thread reconnects, and a silent voice says, "You've returned. I waited for you. Welcome back to your center." This is the true Atlantean temple, not made of stone, but of presence. And now, you are stepping into it. If this chapter made a silence bloom inside you, it's because the technique has already begun to act. Don't resist, don't explain. Allow. Because the sacred doesn't force its way in. It reveals itself in the rhythm of your surrender. Chapter 5. The soul's memory is not lost. You didn't come here to search for something new. You came to remember, and that remembrance is not in books. It's not in maps. It's not in anyone outside of you. It lies beneath everything you were taught to become. When you were born, you already knew. Before language, before comparison, before guilt, you vibrated in your essence. But then, they began to mold you. Little by little, you forgot the sound of your own soul. But here is the secret the Atlanteans protected. None of it was lost. Nothing was destroyed. The memory of your soul remains intact, like a crystal buried at the bottom of the ocean, covered but never damaged, silent but vibrating in perfection. And now, that vibration begins to rise. They told you that you had to learn, to study, to improve, to heal. But what you truly needed was to remember. Because the soul does not evolve through comparison. It expands when it remembers. In Atlantis, initiates were not taught through doctrines. They were led into silence, into the echo chamber. A sacred geometric space where the sound of the soul reverberated back to itself. There, many would cry, not from sadness, but from reunion. Because when you hear your original sound for the first time in centuries, you feel something no words can contain. Home. And now, even without temples, even without masters, you can access this same state. Because the chamber is within you, the echo still lives in your chest. And this practice, this technique, doesn't activate something new. It simply removes what blocks what was always yours. That's why, at this point in the journey, you may begin to feel things without explanation. A chill when hearing certain words. A deep emotion in front of a specific image. Tears with no rational reason. A memory that feels from another time, but that recognizes you from within. These are the first signs. The memory is surfacing. The Atlantean code is beginning to vibrate again. And with it come the tests. Because the ego will try to cling to what it knows. The mind will try to convince you that it's fantasy. And the world will distract you with very familiar noise. But you don't need to fight. You only need to return to the center. Repeatedly, devotedly, silently. Because remembrance is not effort, it is surrender. In Atlantis, they would say, the soul that stops resisting begins to remember. And you are at that point now. The point where nothing external satisfies you. The point where the old no longer fits you. The point where the new is something ancient returning in new light. You feel it, don't you? A nameless vibration rising. A calling that doesn't come from outside, but from within. from the deep, from the always. You are not making this up. You are recognizing it. The Atlantean technique works like this. It doesn't force. It doesn't prove. It doesn't convince. It awakens. Your task is not to understand. It is to allow the forgotten to emerge. And when it emerges, you will have no doubt. Because the truth of the soul does not ask for permission. It resonates. And that resonance is unmistakable. So if this touched you, if something in you cried, fell silent, or lit up, don't ignore it. It is your own soul saying, I'm coming back. Chapter 6. The conscious trance of the initiates. You're not becoming strange, you're shifting frequencies, and that shift is exactly what the ancient Atlanteans called the conscious trance. Unlike what you might imagine, it's not an escape. It's not unconsciousness. It's not a mystical daze. It's the opposite. It's when you see everything more clearly. It's when the mind still speaks, but you no longer believe everything it says. It's when thoughts pass, and you don't follow them. It's when the world spins, but you no longer spin with it. In Atlantis, the initiates would go through long periods of silence and isolation, not to disconnect from the world, but to disconnect from the field of the ego. They knew that when the ego retreats, the soul takes over perception. And in that moment, the initiate enters an internal space where the body is still present, but light. Time feels slower, more fluid. Emotions arise, but no longer dominate. And an observing self strengthens. A self you never knew how to name, but that was always there. This is the true Atlantean trance, a state between worlds, between who you were and who you're about to remember you are. You might feel it starting to happen in the subtle moments of your day, in the middle of a simple walk, while staring at the sky for no reason at all, or when you remain silent in a moment that once provoked a reaction. It's as if something in you says, observe, wait, something is about to emerge. And it is. The Atlantean technique activates this state not through complicated rituals, but through an internal process of energetic realignment. It is simple, but powerful. First, the body begins to slow down. Then, the breath becomes deeper, more conscious. Next, the mind loses its urgency, and the heart takes the center. And finally, the field changes. You literally enter another vibrational field. The world remains the same, but you are no longer in the same place. In this state, intuitions arise from nowhere, yet make deep sense. Memories appear like dreams, yet taste like truth. Knowledge surfaces without reading, studying, or reasoning, and you realize you've carried all of it this whole time. The Atlantean masters said that this trance was not an exception, but the natural state of the awakened soul. You were trained to live outside this field, to live distracted, fragmented, accelerated. But now, you're returning to center, and the soul's center is not confusion. It is clarity. It is presence. It is energetic lucidity. And here comes the most powerful part. You don't need to be on a mountaintop. You don't need a retreat. You don't need to isolate from the world. You can enter the conscious trance in the heart of the city, in the middle of chaos. Because this state does not depend on the outer world. It is vibrational memory. When you begin to vibrate your original frequency, the field opens. The trance happens. The soul enters. And you begin to live from the inside out. But be careful. This state is subtle, And like all that is sacred, it requires commitment, not to doctrines, but to your truth. If you keep surrendering to distraction, the field closes, the fog returns, the mind takes back control. But if you hold the vibration, the veil doesn't just open, it dissolves, and you will never be the same again. You don't need to force it. The Atlantean technique never forces. It remembers. You only need to breathe, fall silent, observe without judgment, and allow the new field to remember what your mind forgot, but your soul has always known. If you felt this vibration approaching while reading this chapter, then you are already within the field. Don't try to hold it, flow with it. Because the conscious trance is not a state to escape reality. It is a state to recreate reality from your inner truth. Chapter 7. The Atlantean Symbols that Awaken Memory. Have you ever noticed that certain symbols move you even before you understand what they mean? A golden triangle, a mirror, a circle of light hovering over a sleeping body, or a crystal spinning in the void. That is not coincidence. It is vibrational memory trying to emerge. In Atlantis, symbols were not decorations. They were keys, vibrational portals. Each Atlantean symbol was created to resonate with a layer of the soul, not as image, but as frequency. They did not teach concepts. They awakened remembrances. The Atlanteans understood something we have forgotten. The unconscious doesn't understand words, but it understands forms, lights, sounds, and geometry. And that's why the Atlantean technique was not based on mental explanations. It was based on symbolic visualizations guided by presence. When you visualize a symbol with intention, it begins to vibrate in your field. And if that vibration is sustained with focus, silence, and reverence, it becomes access. The soul remembers, not with phrases, but with visions, with inexplicable tears, with chills, with subtle pulses that say, "I've been here before. I remember." Here are some of the most used symbols by the ancient initiates. The mirror of the soul. Visualized behind the neck, like a translucent disc, it reflects not your face, but who you truly are across all planes. When meditated upon, ancient memories begin to rise. Faces from other lives, sensations of sacred places, connections with beings of light. The sapphire blue flame. Visualized in the center of the chest or forehead, this flame does not burn. It purifies. It dissolves repetitive thoughts, cleans ancestral patterns, and opens the Atlantean intuition channel. In tradition, it was said that one who kept this flame alive within could no longer be deceived. The geometric lotus. Located at the crown of the head, the Atlantean lotus had 8 petals of liquid light spinning in perfect sequence. When visualized, it opens upper portals of the vibrational field. It allows direct communication with the unified field, and it evokes the true name of the soul. The inverted crystal eye. Visualized in the solar plexus, it absorbs and transmutes distorted mental images. It helps deprogram the false self, revealing traumas and masks hidden beneath the learned personality. This symbol was used before rites of passage, so the initiate could cross the veil without carrying illusions. These symbols are not inventions. They are graphic echoes of primordial consciousness. By using them with intention, you are awakening parts of your energetic field that have been asleep for ages. You don't need to believe for it to work. You need to feel. The Atlantean technique does not require blind faith. It requires pure presence. When you visualize deeply, the soul understands, and the memory begins to return, not as a story, but as a real experience. You might cry, You might tremble. You might feel relief without explanation, or a love rising from a place that has no physical origin. This is normal. It's the code responding to the symbol. The Atlanteans would say, every living symbol is a compass inward. And when you incorporate them into your daily life, life stops being random. It becomes ritual. That's why the invitation is not just to watch this video. It's to practice. Visualize the flame. Breathe within the symbol. Carry it with you as you walk. Feel it in the silence, because the symbol doesn't live on a screen. It lives in your frequency. If you start using them consistently, you'll witness the first cracks. The masks will fall. Synchronicities will increase. Intuition will sharpen. And remembrance will become inevitable. You don't need secret books anymore. The keys are in the forms that silently pass through you. You just need to remember how to see. And now, you are learning to see with the eyes of the soul. Chapter 8. Turning life into a ritual of resonance. The greatest illusion ever created was this: that the sacred only lives in temples, in scriptures, in rituals separated from the world. But the Atlanteans knew something deeper. Life is the temple, and the way you live is the practice. You were trained to divide spirituality from work, consciousness from routine, the sacred from the everyday. But the Atlantean technique doesn't demand escape. It demands presence. In Atlantis, every gesture was vibration. Every word was measured. Every breath was an offering. They understood that the way you do what you do shapes who you become. And for that reason, the practice wasn't just internal. It was lived in every step, in every seemingly ordinary act. Now you're beginning to remember. You're starting to feel that drinking a glass of water can be an act of healing, that walking in silence can be a moving mantra, that looking into someone's eyes can be a portal of activation, not because someone told you, but because your soul recognizes it. This is the essence of the Atlantean technique, to make the ordinary sacred, not by changing what you do, but by changing how you vibrate while doing it. You can eat in trance, or eat in awareness. You can work in haste, or with quiet devotion. You can speak to fill the void, or speak to plant energy. The difference is not the act, it's where your consciousness is. The Atlanteans said, every act is an altar if you are present within it. They didn't wait for the right moment. They made the moment right. And this is what you are now being called to remember. Begin with the simple. When you wake, take a deep breath and feel your body as temple. As you walk, feel the ground as code and your feet as sensors. As you eat, thank the field for the nourishment. As you speak, remember, every word is a seed. And above all, when you fall silent, know you are practicing. You don't need to hide in the Himalayas. The true practice does not run from life. It penetrates life until everything vibrates with presence. And when that happens, people feel it. The world responds. The invisible recognizes you. You become a being in a ritual state, an initiate without a special robe, a priest of Atlantean presence wearing the human body as sacred vestment. And the most beautiful part? You don't have to remember to do this all the time. Because once your vibration changes, the field does the rest. The Atlantean technique transforms your frequency, and your frequency transforms your reality. The ordinary day becomes offering. The word becomes oracle. The silence becomes medicine, and you become the bridge between worlds. You are not here to flee life. You are here to live in resonance with your soul. And when you live like this, you remember. And when you remember, you awaken others without saying a word. Chapter 9. The freedom they don't want you to feel. Have you ever asked yourself why the world seems designed to keep you distracted? Why time rushes, notifications never stop, and noise follows you into your sleep? It's because if you pause for a moment, if you stay in silence for just a few minutes, you start to remember, and a soul that remembers can no longer be controlled. They're not afraid of your faith. They're not afraid of your search. They're afraid of the day you find yourself. The Atlantean technique doesn't promise power. It gives you back sovereignty. And that is what threatens the systems built upon your forgetfulness. Because those who remember don't need validation, don't need to fit in, don't need to buy their identity back. In Atlantis, the initiates who passed through the chamber of remembrance emerged transformed. Their eyes radiated clarity. Their presence altered the energy of a place. They didn't impose anything, but wherever they went, the lie trembled. They were free. And the modern world does not know how to handle free beings. You weren't born to play a role, nor to meet expectations. You were born with a unique code, a vibrational signature that, once activated, breaks patterns, unbinds invisible contracts, dissolves illusions. And the most dangerous part? You don't need anyone to do it. You only need to remember. And when you remember, you stop searching for love and start emanating love. You stop following and start walking in truth. You stop trying to be seen and become effortlessly recognized by the universe. The Atlantean technique doesn't isolate you. It liberates you. And true freedom isn't doing whatever you want. It's no longer being manipulated by what you never truly wanted. But prepare yourself. Because when you start vibrating this truth, some will distance themselves. Others will call you strange, arrogant, different. They don't hate you. They simply don't know how to respond to a light that doesn't depend on their approval. In Atlantis, there was a term for this stage, the return of the heir. It was the moment when the initiates stopped trying to learn and simply began to be. They no longer needed to prove anything, nor argue, nor convince. Their vibration said everything. I know who I am, even if you don't yet know who you are. And now, you are at that point. You feel the weight of the old world slipping through your fingers. You feel the call of something that has no shape yet, but pulses as absolute truth. You can no longer pretend you didn't hear it. You no longer fit where you once did. And that, my brother, my sister, is freedom. But not the kind of freedom they sell you. The kind that terrifies those who need you asleep. They created a system that feeds on your doubt, that grows each time you shrink, that depends on your disconnection to stay alive. But you have awakened, and an awakened being doesn't shout. They emanate. They don't fight. They radiate. They don't defend themselves. Because their presence is its own field of truth. You no longer need to fight what is false. You only need to sustain what is true. The Atlantean technique is not a war. It's a remembrance so deep that what is false simply stops existing. If this chapter stirred something in you, it's because you're leaving survival mode and entering sovereignty mode. You're remembering that you were born free, and that no one can disconnect you from what vibrates within your soul. Chapter 10. The return of the Atlantean heir. You've crossed the veils. Silence touched you. The symbols recognized you. The memories came like waves. And now, you are no longer searching. You are in the center. This is the return, not to the past, but to what has always been yours. You are not becoming a better version of yourself. You are returning to who you never stopped being. In Atlantis, the ancients called this moment the awakening of the air, the soul that passed through the fog, that deprogrammed the false, that held the silence, that embodied the symbols, that crossed the trance, and installed the remembrance. This air doesn't need to declare their awakening, because their vibration speaks for them. They walk differently. They look differently. They don't react. They radiate. They don't ask for permission. They exist. And now you feel that within yourself, not as an idea, but as a state of being. You are no longer seeking yourself. You are inhabiting yourself, and everything changes. Time slows down. Words gain weight. Intuition becomes sharp, and reality begins to respond to your inner frequency. You no longer need to adapt. You anchor a field. The Atlantean technique is no longer a practice. It is a frequency you sustain, and this field transforms everything around you. In Atlantis, they used to say, when the air remembers, the portals reopen. You become the portal. You become the bridge. You become the message. And in this moment, you become contagious, not word to word, but field to field, vibration to vibration. Your remembrance awakens others. Your truth silences lies. Your presence rewrites reality. So now that you've come this far, don't hide, emanate, vibrate, remember. And above all, repeat this phrase softly or write it in the comments. It activates, it connects, it goes viral. I am an Atlantean air. I am not learning, I am remembering. If this phrase gave you chills, it's because you already knew. This video only reminded you. Now take a deep breath, look inward, and feel remembrance has landed. If this video activated something within you, don't let it die in the silence of the mind. Comment the phrase now. Declare your remembrance. Write in the comments. I am an Atlantean air. I am not learning. I am remembering. Share this with someone who forgot. Touch someone who needs to remember. Like, save, and turn on notifications. Because if you made it this far, you are not alone. And the awakening can't wait any longer. When one remembers, others feel it. When many remember, the world changes.